So let's get straight into this week's lecture. Like I said, this is a whole lot of material, a lot of definitions, a lot of terminology and best practices and things like that. So I'm probably not going to hit all of these. There's going to be a couple that I skip. So just remember to do your readings before you go into the tech module exam and the blog. So the first thing we want to cover is the role that it plays in our daily lives. And to do that, we first have to define some terms. Firstly, just what is the internet? It seems like this big nebulous thing. And even I sometimes struggle with defining it if somebody were to ask me on the spot, hey, what is it? But here is the best definition I can give you. It is a global network of communication and information services. It is composed of computers on their own smaller networks that are each connected either by wire or wirelessly through radio signals. We usually describe that as Wi-Fi or 4G, things like that. Think of it like a city where you've got these blocks that have their own buildings that may or may not be connected, doing this like sharing work and all this other such business. And then you have roads connecting those blocks. Those roads are what you would consider a sort of internet, whereas each block is its own network. And the way that we do this for, say, going from one country to another is fiber optic cables, which, yes, we run fiber optic cables through the ocean all the way from the east coast of the US to Europe or Africa, and from the west coast to Asia. Some like team somewhere was tasked with doing that just so that we could have a global network. And you might be wondering, why not use satellites? We have those just orbiting the planet. The biggest problems with those is that they're slow. And in order to maintain that connection, you would effectively need a ring of satellites all around the planet. And so that's expensive, impractical, and inefficient. So no, we just wire everybody in across the planet. Next up, web pages. You've all seen them. You all know what they are. It is a single page of information on the internet. It could be something that holds a news article or images or this Microsoft Teams meeting or whatever. A web page is a single page, usually described as an HTML file. You don't need to know too much about what that is. Just know that that is sort of the backbone for what's being displayed on a page. And a website is a collection of said pages and possibly some other services like payment verification and database systems and other such things like that. The website is usually connected to other websites, and each of these has just a whole bunch of HTML web pages and other files to design and organize everything. And how do we access these? Well, through a browser. Google Chrome, Internet Explorer. It's no longer, which is outdated, but has been replaced with Microsoft Edge, Firefox. Those are your most common browsers. Some people use Opera or Safari. There's other less known options. And these are used to navigate the web, and that is largely done through hyperlinks. You'll almost never hear somebody call them a hyperlink. Instead, you're going to just hear a link. And what this is a usually clickable or tappable, if you're on a mobile device, part of a page, whether that be a button or a piece of text that's been recolored and underlined to signify that it is a link. And that may take you to another page on the website you're currently on. It may take you to a completely different website. It may take you to a service. But these links contain what is called a URL, or a Uniform Resource Locator. You've seen these at the top of your web browser, I'm sure, and what these represent is an address to the web page that you are currently visiting. And it generally consists of 3 or 4 major parts. First off, you have this beginning HTTP. This is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and it is the backbone standard for how the internet works. It is what takes this URL and sends it off to, let me correct myself. That is what takes the URL and interprets it to find the page that you need. And so with that, you have the server address. That is the www.something.something. Oftentimes, you're not going to need to enter www. That's just going to be assumed. The main thing that you need to remember is the domain name, such as Cengage.com, jsu.edu. We'll get into what those letters, com, edu, gov, org, we'll get to that in a second. I'll explain what that's all about. But HTTP will take this domain name and it will translate it into a numerical ID. And that is what it uses to locate the page that you want, or the website that you want to go to. Next up, you have the path name. And what that does is once we've found the website that we want to go to, the web server that contains it, we then follow a series of folders. In this case, we want to look inside the student folder for index.html. And so it's going to just follow that path until it reaches index.html, at which point it will load that. Index.html, of course, being the file name for the exact thing we want to load. I mentioned web servers. These are what hold the information for websites, including their HTML, their styling and organizing files, any resources they use like images, and so on and so forth. And each of these web servers is given a numerical identifier called an IP address. IP standing for Internet Protocol. And that number is usually, or that address is 4 numbers from 0 to 255. It might be something like 192.64.0.7. Every internet-enabled device is given an IP address as soon as it connects to a network. Regardless of which network you're using, you could be on JSU's network, your home network, or some free Wi-Fi at a coffee shop somewhere. When you do that, the network has a set of addresses that it can give, and it will randomly select one that is not taken and give it to your device. And that becomes your device's ID number for the internet. Moving on, we'll take a look at some basic features of a web browser. Firstly is the address bar. That's got your URL for the current page. That's where you can enter a new website name or paste a URL to go to another website. The cache is a temporary memory storage for your web browser that keeps track of recently viewed websites. So you have, think of it like a stack of pages. All these are different web pages, and they're all collected into this one spot. That stack of pages is your cache. Then you have the navigation bar. I'm going to skip breadcrumbs for a second. The navigation bar is how your computer makes use of the cache. So you press the back button, it goes to the previous page. You press the next button, it goes to the one after that, if one exists. Oftentimes, you'll find that the forward button is grayed out because, well, there isn't a next page. And additionally, you have the home button to take you back to your home page, whatever default you've established, whether that be JSU, Canvas, or what have you. And then you have refresh, which simply reloads the page you're currently on. And finally, breadcrumbs are something you may see on some websites, but not necessarily all of them. If you've noticed on Canvas, when you click on one of your classes, the class gets added to the top of the page in blue. When you click on modules, modules is added next to it. If you click on an assignment, now that's added next to modules. Those are your breadcrumbs. Some sites can be very complicated and have several layers of this. And so the breadcrumbs help you to not get lost within the website. You can always retrace your steps just by using that handy little bar at the top of the page. Not every website has it, unfortunately, but it's becoming more and more common. And now, quickly, let's go over what this .com, .org business is. These are called top-level domains, or just TLDs. And these give you a general idea of what kind of website you're visiting. There's a whole bunch of them, far more than what you see on this list. But, you know, your common ones. Com for commercial. Org is organizations. That's things like churches and charities and other kinds of nonprofit groups most of the time. EDU is your educational institution, so schools, colleges. Mil for military. Civilians are probably unlikely to see those. I personally have never seen one, and I'm not exactly old. I'm only 28, but still, as much as I've used the internet and I've never seen a .mil, I don't think they're accessible to civilians. .net is for like network service providers, and I've seen it also used for art galleries and things like that. But aside from these, you may see something with multiple dots, something like .co.uk. That is a commercial website based out of Britain. You may see the same thing for Australia, but co.au. You may also see ca.gov. That would refer to the Canadian government, where plain old .gov is for the US government. There's a ton of these. We'd be here all day if I tried to go over all of them. So we'll just move on. And one topic I don't want to hit on too much here, because most people who are not computer science majors don't really need to know much about this, is all the different internet standards. We've mentioned IP and HTTP, and we've mentioned URLs and TLDs. These are all different standards that have been developed, and there are tons and tons more. If you are a computer science or computer information systems major, eventually here you will take CS450, computer networking, where you will be expected to learn many of these. Not only learn what they're called, what they do, what level of access they have, all this other good stuff. And I find it very difficult to commit to memory, so I try to have a reference on hand. And fortunately, there are two such very good references. The people who make these standards, they keep them open to the public. Anybody can view and use them. And they are the Internet Engineering Task Force, or IETF, and the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C. You can view their websites, and they have detailed information on standards and other internet-based technology. All right, moving on to talking about web pages and websites in particular. Most of you, I'm sure, have spent quite a bit of time on the internet. It's become a very important part of our lives, especially with COVID-19. And you already know that there are websites for just about everything. Business, religion, politics, whatever you want to talk about, entertainment, news, weather. Some websites are owned by individuals, other websites are owned by massive corporations, and there's everything in between. And a quick word about web apps. We've already talked about web apps in this class, particularly the web version of Office 365. That is an example of a web app. You access a software program through your web browser, and there are advantages to it. You don't have to worry about updates. You don't have to install anything on your computer. There's nothing taking up space on your hard drive, which, depending on what you do with your computer, that space may be very limited. So web apps can be very handy in that regard. On the other hand, you have to have an internet connection. If your connection goes out or if it's unreliable, you're just not going to be able to use these web apps. If there is some interruption in service, that will affect your ability to work. You may not be able to access the web app for a while. And finally, and this is why we cannot use the web version of Office to do our labs for this class, is that they often have fewer features and they run slower. Particularly the fewer features is our problem. The reason this is done is just because these apps can get large and complicated, and that makes loading them on a web browser very difficult. So it's better to reach a middle ground where we only load what we absolutely need for everyday use. Unfortunately, you're going to be covering a little bit more than everyday use. So the web version is just, it's not sufficient for what you need to do. All right. Looking at the content of each web page, I've already explained generally what you can expect to find on them. But in addition to that, you've got the 5 basic parts of a web page, and knowing these can help you to quickly scan through a website and find exactly what you need. Now, those 5 parts are, first, the header. That has usually some kind of image, might be a logo, it might be a background, to sort of set the scene for what kind of website you're visiting. It may include taglines or some basic links. The navigation bar will hold your general directory to sections of a website. So if you look on the JSU website, you have one for academics, one for athletics, one for campus life. That is the navigation bar. And in some cases, when you hover over one of those buttons, it'll break out into a whole bunch of other things for you to choose from. The body of a web page is the meat of it. That is where you find your articles, your images, your explanations of things, and possibly even contact information. If the contact information isn't on the body, you'll likely find it on the sidebar. And it would usually rest on the left or right, or as showed in the example, both. And this has stuff that is related to the body of the page. It might be advertisements. It could be an options menu for something like social media. I've even seen where the sidebar doubles as a nav bar. There's just generally a lot of different things that you can fit onto the sidebar, and it's good to know where that is, what's available. And like I said, this is another place where you may find contact information. Like on JSU's website, generally all contact information is on that one sidebar to the left. And finally, you have the footer. This contains mostly legal information. It's going to have your privacy statement, your terms of service, and copyright notices. This is usually not something you're going to need to refer to all that much, but some websites do put a lot of information in their footer that would be helpful to you. I mentioned Free Code Camp last week. They actually use the footer partly to show trending tutorials and lessons and such for people who are interested in looking at what's popular or just need a suggestion for what to study. Now, security can be a major concern. It, I feel, has gotten to less of one as security standards have been refined. It's nowhere near as bad as it was 15, 20 years ago, but you still need to practice safe browsing. So here are a few simple practices for how to do that. Look for websites with HTTPS instead of HTTP. What this does, it is the same standard. It is still the same hypertext transfer protocol that every website uses, but it adds a layer of encryption, which is effectively scrambling within some sort of guidelines the information that is being transferred so that people can't just grab it and use it for whatever nefarious purposes they may have. Websites will have a digital certificate. You'll see this to the left of the address bar, and that is an indicator that that is a trustworthy site. Usually, I don't know that I would trust it 100% of the time, but if you see it, it is a good indicator that it may be a website to use. The lock icon usually indicates that you're on a secure site. That one is one that I tend to miss a lot. I don't even pay attention to it personally, but I do notice it. And again, it is another way of letting you know that you are on a safe website. And another thing about a note about sensitive information. If a website is asking you to enter personal details like your address or phone number or what have you, most of them are first going to have you sign in to some account with a username or password, which itself is also encrypted. If they don't, that's a good indicator that you probably should not be on that website, and you should go look elsewhere for whatever information or service they're trying to provide. And now, one of the bigger topics for this week, e-commerce. I'm sure, again, thanks to COVID-19, most, if not all of us have taken advantage of it at some point. I used it long before, and I'm going to continue to use it long after. It's super helpful. And so let's get into it, explain exactly what it is. Simply put, it is the transfer of goods and services using the internet. There are a ton of different ways people can go about it, and it breaks out into three main categories. First off, you have business to consumer. This is what most of us are familiar with. This is going to a website to purchase goods. It might be something like Amazon or Walmart's website or the retail side of eBay. These are places where a business will set its prices, and then you purchase the items. You pay for them on the website typically, or you might schedule for pickup or delivery or what have you. You have consumer to consumer, where, as it sounds, people sell items to each other, individual to individual. And this is often done through auction websites. Again, eBay, they're more known for their probably things like BZID, if they're still around. I haven't heard anything about them in ages. But these websites are for consumer to consumer sales. And finally, business to business. Naturally, this is businesses trading goods and services back and forth, selling, buying, etc. And these are handled very differently. We'll get into how it's different in a minute. First, let's talk about the general pros and cons for the average person when it comes to on the plus side, you have a greater deal of variety. Wall cannot carry everything, neither can Johnson's, naturally. So going to an online store may give you more options. Will most certainly give you a lot more options, actually. Certain foodstuffs, certain clothing items, all this other stuff. It's convenient, and the variety plays into that as well. You don't have to go hunting from store to store. You don't have to go to Walmart and Johnson's. Then let me check Grubmart, see if they've got something worth having. You just go to one site, you find what you want, and you get it, or you go to another, and it's all very quick and easy. Additionally, it's very helpful for people on a budget. Number one, you're not paying for gas. Number two, you have more opportunities to find savings. So you might spend $20 on an item if you go into Walmart, or you may spend $15 on the same item if you buy it from Amazon. There's also opportunities for coupons and other such things. On the negative side, all the security measures that they can put in place are not perfect. There is always the possibility that things can go wrong. And so if you're going to use it, you do have to keep an eye on your bank information, your credit card, whatever you're using. And also for people who prefer a face-to-face exchange when they're doing business, the indirect nature of e-commerce may be something that just completely turns somebody away. So it's a case of use your best judgment, know what you prefer, and make a rational decision. Again, make sure you're buying from a reputable website. All right, before we move on, I realize I've covered a lot without stopping. Does anybody have any questions before we continue?
I think we're good.
Sounds like it. All right. So moving on to e-commerce for businesses. I have 19 minutes left, so I need to speed it up a little. These are usually done with teams of people on both sides who negotiate and finalize terms and other such things. They might have multiple businesses trying to buy goods, and so, or trying to sell their goods rather, and so they might place a bid with a business such as Walmart, who will then select the lowest bidder. All right, so another useful feature of e-commerce is the use of cookies. You've probably heard of these before, not the pastry, not the snack, but the browser cookies. These are little pieces of information that track your web history. These are used by online storefronts to make recommendations on what you might want based on what you've bought or looked at before. And they also offer secure ways to pay. They might use an external source like PayPal, or they might use their own built-in service. Again, these are not bulletproof, but they do make things safer. We're going to skip that last slide on e-commerce because I've said enough. Information literacy. What this is how someone finds, evaluates, uses, and communicates information. Good digital literacy can help you when you are searching for a particular kind of information, knowing what tools to use, knowing how to spot flaws or outright falsehoods in information, and manage all of this information that you're taking in on a daily basis to make informed decisions. So as far as search engines go, we'll talk quickly about these. You've used these before, most if not all of you. Search engines include Google and Bing. These crawl the internet using software programs called spiders or crawlers, and they generate an index of information based on search terms. And when you conduct a search, what's called a query, it is going to peruse that that database of stuff that has been collected by these crawlers, and it's going to find what's most relevant to those search terms. It will organize them based on relevance, date, where the terms appear on the page, and other such features to try and give you the best possible results. All right, so there are other options. If you do not want or need a search engine, you can use search boxes on specific websites. If you already know that you want to go to Amazon to look to buy something, then why search for Amazon products on Google when you can just use their search box? Also, web and subject directories. These are less common nowadays. They were everywhere in the 90s, but these generally collect a bunch of web pages and curate them, just links to them based on a particular subject. And finally, you have specialty search tools. Google has its own, such as Google Scholar for scholarly articles when you're doing academic research. Other such specialty tools, you've got Wolfram Alpha for math. And generally, you kind of want to know about these specialty search features for your major. Like for me, I go to places like IEEE Explorer and the ACM Digital Library for my information, my academic searches. When you are conducting a web search, there are a few things you want to keep in mind. Number one is be specific. The more vague your terms are, the more likely you are to get unwanted results. Try phrasing what you want as a question. That can help because oftentimes that's how journal articles are titled. It may be a forum post. It may be a blog post. It could be any of these things. And so phrasing it as a question, some common language way of stating what you need, can help narrow your search. Also, identifying keywords. It may be more beneficial to narrow it down to just those keywords instead of typing out a whole sentence. Selecting an appropriate search tool. Again, right tool for the job, know what you need, use your best judgment. And expect to have to do multiple searches at times. You may find that the results you get aren't sufficient. So, okay, I'm going to have to reword my search terms, refine them, make them better, and that will help to narrow or broaden what you're doing, what you're looking for. And of course, web browsers offer their own tools to help you do this, such as filters, recommendations, or just other questions that are similar to what you're doing, what you're looking for, that other people have searched for. All right. Anything on this list, on this slide that needs to be mentioned? One thing. Each search that you do, the first page is going to have the most relevant results. So if you don't find anything on the first page, it's probably not going to be worth it to go to the next page or any other after that. Just try refining your search. And also, if you see ads or sponsored links, obviously those are not necessarily what you're looking for. Those are from sponsors that Google or whoever is hosting the search engine is being paid to have on their website. And finally, you could use these operators to help your search. You can use quotation marks to tell the engine to use this wording exactly. You could use a vertical bar or pipe symbol to say one of these two is what I want to find. A hyphen excludes whatever is to the right. So in this case, we see that we're looking for augmented reality and not virtual reality. We are looking specifically for augmented. The asterisk or star is your wild card, and this says anything can go here. Any length, any content, whatever. I'll tell you, I have never used those on a search engine. I've never used the wild card, nor have I used the hyphen or the vertical bar. And finally, you have the pound dot dot pound operator, which specifies a range of numbers. You can use this to search for articles that were written between two years. Say you want to find something that was written between 2000 and 2010. You would enter your subject, what your search terms are, and then 2000 dot dot 2010. And while conducting online research, there are a few things that we need to keep in mind. Firstly, again, there are specialized tools. Look to see what your major uses. If you're computer science or computer information systems, you might want to look at the ACM Digital Library or IEEE, that's IEEE Explorer, XPLORE. I don't know why they dropped the E on that when they have all the others, but those are for computing technology and electrical engineering related things. Wolfram Alpha, again, is for math. And check with your professor or whoever, or your advisor, or whoever in your major to find out what academic search tools you can use, what libraries are available. To verify information, we rely on the CARS checklist. CARS standing for credibility, accuracy, reasonableness, and support. And credibility is simply checking who the author is. Is this someone who is a professional who has some sort of certification in this area? Are they somebody that I can trust listening to? Accuracy, looking for biases, looking for inaccuracies. Obviously, looking for any potential problems in what they're saying. And this could be done through support, which we'll get to in a second, but also just reading carefully, seeing what they're saying, if they're trying to spin some kind of narrative of their own. Reasonableness, look for clues to indicate whether the information is fair and sensible, things that are reporting both sides of the story. And finally, support is looking for reputable sources and authorities, things like local newspapers. If something like New York Times or the Washington Post or whoever posts an article, you read it and you want to look deeper, look into where they say this story occurred and go look at its local newspaper. Look for proper names and other such things like that. These procedures can help you avoid getting misled, buying into some wild narrative that someone has written for whatever reason, whether it be to entertain or to deliberately mislead. There are people out there who will do that. And so just use the CARS model to protect yourself against bad information. when you are collecting content from online sources, please be wary of things like copyright law. This gives the creator of some work the right to sell, distribute, and publish that work. That right does not extend to everybody else. That is exclusive to the copyright holder. And so you have to be sure that you are using it fairly. There is fair use doctrine, which lets you use part of the material with a citation. You must reference that material, tell everyone where it came from so that they know that it wasn't yours. Some things may be in public domain, which means you could use it and don't have to worry about any of this. And excuse me for a second, my throat's dry. Do I have water? Yes. I apologize for that. When you are citing sources, there are different formats based on the different styles, such as APA, MLA, and IEEE has its own citation style. And you want to know in advance which one you should be using. And you want to be sure that you've got your correct formatting down depending on what kind of information source you have. An image is going to have a different reference style for each format than a text citation. And please remember, I want to close on this. This is very important as a college student. A note about plagiarism. Plagiarism is any time that you reference somebody's material, whether it is directly quoted or copied or paraphrased. If you reworded it to the point that it is not recognizably from that paper or that article, you still have to reference it. You still have to put in a citation. And failing to do so is plagiarism, no matter how far removed your interpretation is. You still borrowed it from that person, and you still have to give credit to them and their work. Failing to do that, if you are found to have committed plagiarism, it can carry some stiff penalties. I've heard of people being expelled from school. I've heard of people losing credit hours. Like, say the last 3 semesters of credit hours have just been wiped from their transcript, and they have to do those classes all over again. I've heard of that. It's been a while, but I have heard of it. I've also heard of some people facing legal penalties over this. I don't know if I can verify. I don't know if that's entirely true. I've only heard of that once, but just know that plagiarism is taken very seriously in academics and pretty much everywhere else, and you should be taking it very seriously as well.